Okay, good morning folks, Alan Hillson here again from Pipers'Persuasion, and looking at the date of this is 20th of September, got the month right, 2018. We've got another chapter or whatever on Pipers'Persuasion this morning, and we're in, I nearly said sunny Alexandria. It's not made up its mind. There was a big storm yesterday. Storm Alley. Anyway, it hasn't arrived here yet today, and if it stays off the next hour, we'll have some light in the situation. Who are we interviewing today? Donald MacPhee at his home, very kindly. Thanks very much for welcoming me here this afternoon. Well, it is this afternoon, and at one time we're finished.
Pleasure.
In Alexandria, which is next to Balloch, which is just past Govan. Okay.
Loch Lomond.
Near Bonnie Loch Lomond. How many miles are you away from Loch Lomond?
You can be at Loch Lomond probably in about 3 miles.
Okay, that's not bad.
No, it's
not bad. We're on the verge of the Scottish Highlands.
Exactly.
So anyway, we're here to get a lot of information out of Donald, and we'll cover a lot of ground because we're finishing up with reed making, but we're going to start off with where he came from, USA, cover solo piping, various other bits and pieces to do with piping, possible composition CDs, teaching, and moving on to pipe bands, the Scottish Power and FM, and then the others that we catch in the net, and further that developed into judging pipe bands latterly, and judging solos. And another string to the bow is playing for Highland dancing, a most difficult subject. One that I gave up many years ago, entirely frustrating. I'd rather police a Rangers and Celtic game than play for Highland dancers, can I tell you. We'll get into that. Anyway, enough of my blabbing here. We're just going to open the conversation now. Welcome, Donald.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Persuasion.
Thank you.
Can you tell me, where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Michigan in the United States of America, and
what state's that?
Michigan.
Michigan,
that's
right.
the state.
Okay, right.
Dearborn, Michigan, which is the world headquarters of the Ford Motor Company.
No.
So if you're ever on a TV quiz show,
yeah,
you'll be able to answer that question. The world headquarters for Ford Motor Company.
Detroit?
Dearborn, Michigan.
Aye, but it's Detroit and that.
It's a suburb of Detroit, that's correct.
There we go.
Yeah.
So not that bad.
No.
And how about Chicago? Where's that?
Chicago's west of there and on the other side of the Great Lakes. So
is that a different state? No,
it is, yeah, that's in Illinois.
Is it?
It is, huh?
Yeah, okay.
Well,
quiz program. That's the answers, folks.
But the way that I wound up being born in Michigan was all 4 of my grandparents came from Scotland, and 2 from the island of Lewis, 1 from Ploughton, and 1 from South Uist. My mother's side of the family came from Lewis, and after World War I, there wasn't much opportunity in this country. And the oldest son got the croft. So basically, if you weren't the oldest son,
yeah,
you needed to find ventures anew.
Yeah.
So on my mum's side of the family, my grandfather immigrated to Ontario as a tenant farmer, which means that a farm over in Ontario pays his way over. He serves his time, whatever that fee was, as far as just as far over there. He serves his time. Once his time's finished, then he's free to do whatever he wants.
Typically, how many years was that?
You know what? I don't know.
See, I read a recent article. Somebody's looking for a family from Scotland or wherever to go over and do some similar. Maybe Cape Breton. We're talking about 3 years or something. You know.
Well, I think it may have been subsidized a wee bit by the Canadian government because of the fact that they were looking for people to work there, and they were looking as far as workers in that country.
So where did they go to?
To Ontario. I don't know exactly
somewhere
the farms.
in Ontario.
Yeah. I don't know exactly the farms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My other grandfather did as well. I'm just I'm talking about my mom's.
Okay, yeah.
My mom's mom and dad right now, and then laterally my grandmother. She immigrated right to Detroit, and she was sponsored by somebody saying that basically if this person comes into the country, then they won't be a burden on the government. So anyway, that's how the one side came over. The other side basically the same way. Both my grandmothers were housekeepers for wealthy individuals, let's say.
Right.
And then my dad's dad, who was the piper, who came from South Uist, he came over as a tenant farmer. And once you served your time, you either went on the boats in the St. Lawrence Seaway or the Great Lakes if you wanted to. If you wanted
moved to where?
He went to Detroit because
Detroit, direct.
Yeah,
Okay.
Both my grandfathers did. The big boom in industry at that time was the automobile industry.
Okay.
And both my grandfathers.
What decade are you talking about?
This would be the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. So the early 20s. My grandfather MacPhee, he came down to Glasgow first. He was only 5'8", and I say that because of the fact that Johnny Rochin was recruiting at that time as far as pipers to come into the Bay End, and you had to be 6 foot in these days in order
So
to
that's
play.
John MacDonald, the pipe major, the City of Glasgow Police.
That's correct. And so the apparently, according to my dad, the guys who were really good players but weren't tall enough played in the Glasgow Transport Band.
Aye.
And all the ones that were beyond 6 foot became police officers.
It's actually 5'10" and a half.
Oh, at that time was it 5'10"
Yeah.
and a half? Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay. Well, I was told 6 foot, but there you go. My grandfather was 5'8" and had a 21-inch neck, so he was a
Sturdy.
yeah. Well, they were known as the Boxers in South Uist, and had quite a relationship, a physical relationship with the Morrisons. So I remember Rona. I remember Rona Lightfoot telling me. She says there's stories that your father would that your grandfather would come through to one of the Morrison boys and say, "Morrison, what size is your neck?" And then from there, it went outside, and it was a form of fun. It was a form of it wasn't you think of fighting as just hate versus good or whatever or anything else like that, and it was just after having a couple of beers and stuff like this. Well, let's get after it and let's go. So and that would be Fred's family.
Yeah.
So they were in Garnish, and then my grandfather came from Garnish. So
Now, you're talking about young Fred, Alfred.
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes.
His father was Fred, who was the schoolmaster.
that's right. Yeah.
And so would it be his father, or would it actually be Fred?
It would be a relation. It would be a relation. When I wasn't smart enough and asked in order to ask Rona, it was one of these
I've
things.
got to ask these tough questions.
No, it was one of these things where the heat of the moment when she said that, everybody kind of laughed, and I never said, now which Morrison was that? Because it just would have, I don't know, wouldn't
Interesting. Now we know the Morrisons' piping history to a certain extent, because I've already interviewed Fred Morrison.
Yeah.
Alfred was his, but it's known as Fred Morrison.
Yes.
And you'll need to go to that interview, and you'll learn more about his forebears. But we're still on about the MacPhees here.
Well,
now, you mentioned about being a piper. Tell me something about that piping history and etc.
Yeah, my grandfather had
What's his name?
Had 6 brothers. Donald MacPhee.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably the most famous of the brothers as far as piping wise goes was a Michael MacPhee, who won the marches at the Argyllshire Gathering. His name's up in the College of Piping. I want to say in the mid-20s, early 20s, something like that. He was, or it might have been later. Sorry, he was the piper for the Marquess of Bute, and how all that worked out was that the Marquess of Bute was a well-known Catholic, and with the MacPhees coming from South Uist, the highest-ranking Catholic pipe major in the British Army at this time was my great uncle. His name was Michael MacPhee, and so
what regiment?
He was in the Black Watch.
Okay, interesting.
He started off. He was at the retreat at Mons, and he was at another. Famous battle. But after one of the battles, the Black Watch got decimated, and so they took guys from other regiments and stuff like that. And I believe he was in. The Camerons before that.
So it's a replacement for those that died during the battle.
Exactly.
There was a tremendous amount of pipers shot and killed in the First World War.
Yeah, he was pipe major of the 11th Battalion. There was Alistair Duthie who's done a lot of research on my great uncle. If you recall, I represented the Black Watch at the piping recitals that the Scottish Piper Society put on. They got a grant, and any tune that was composed during World War I,
yes,
or by a man that served during World War I or stuff like that. So they actually called me up to represent the Black Watch. I think it was due to the fact of my great uncle having
been there.
Yes, yeah. He was pipe major of the 11th Battalion, and so anyway, after the war, he was brought out of the army by the Marquess of Bute, and he was the Marquess of Bute's personal piper for a number of years, and that was Michael MacPhee. All the brothers played the bagpipes. All the brothers played the
your grandfather, though, Donald MacPhee, tell me about his piping.
Glasgow Transport. He was taught by a pipe teacher up in South Uist by the name of Curry, and they were well-known pipe teachers at that time, and he moved down. His father played, and so all the brothers played the chanter, the fatin, and when he came down to Glasgow after World War I, he remained piping. Piping was a big part of his life. He played with the band and got this opportunity to become a tenant farmer, to get passage over to the States because it was quite expensive, or to get passage over to North America, I should say. Went over there, served his time, and like my other grandfather, the big booming industry at that time was the Ford Motor Company, so he went down to Detroit.
Just to talk about your other grandfather, I take it he wasn't a piper.
He was not a piper. No,
okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
so that takes care of the grandparents.
That's right.
They're installed. They're in Toronto area.
Yep.
And they're working in the motor industry.
Well, they worked as tenant farmers, and then they went down to Detroit.
Yeah.
To the Ford Motor Company, because that was a big booming industry at that time.
And what happened after the crash, the 29 crash? Did that affect?
Oh yeah. I mean that was there. As you have nowadays, you have sections of big cities that are have portions of them like Chinatown and the Polish part and the Italian part and that kind of thing. Well, in Detroit they formed what they called the Lewis Society. It would have been probably better represented or called the Hebridean Society, but the Lewis Society was simple, and it was basically people that spoke better Gaelic than they did English.
Yeah.
So they formed their own little community. There was an old country baker, a Scottish baker, and a Scottish butcher, and that kind of a thing. And so that's where my mom and dad met as kids, was at this Lewis Society.
Good.
So that my mom never played, never did whatever. My dad played without a doubt, and he played on the right shoulder, like most of the Irish people do.
Yeah.
And his dad didn't though. His dad played on the left shoulder, and when my dad taught me, it was very naturally that I just put my left hand on the top, and he didn't decide to change it. So
so you're conventional then.
Yes, I am.
For want of a better explanation.
That's it. And piping was very much my grandfather's life in as much as when work was finished, he came home, he bathed, he ate, and then he went and he played pipes, or he went and got the practice trainer out. He was in a pipe band called the Detroit Highlanders, which was a part of the Ford Pipe Band, and the Ford Pipe Band they run around and did functions and stuff like that.
Various gigs.
Yeah,
See, the Lewis Society did dances and accordion music and all
Absolutely,
that sort
of course
stuff.
they did.
Yeah, same as the Highlanders in Glasgow.
Every Friday night, Al.
Yeah,
every Friday. They wouldn't do it on Saturday.
Yeah, it's always a Friday night.
It
Saturday night, 2 years to Sabbath.
So
yeah.
and absolutely, they got together. The men would set the hall up and the chairs and all that kind of stuff, and then the women would all bring a dish each.
Yeah.
And they would have a ceilidh, and they would have
Singing,
very much a social
dancing.
function. Exactly. Yeah.
And piping. of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. There were, and the Highland dancing community and the piping community. It was very, very much. Well, I think it was the thing to do. They didn't. In order to have a television, you really had to be really wealthy. But so it was a form of entertainment, and that's what they did.
Much more social.
Very much so.
Atmosphere.
Yeah.
Now that's your grandparents.
Yep.
Your father would come along. What happened there?
He was taught by his dad, my grandfather Donald MacPhee, and his name is Sandy MacPhee, Alexander MacPhee, and he was taught at a very young age, and was probably a situation where he was forced to play, but very, very happily that he did.
Aye.
And so he competed and was involved in pipe bands. He was best mates with a fellow by the name of Gordon Tuck, who was pipe major of the McNish Distillery Pipe Band, and they got Gord's students together and my dad's students together at a time during the 60s, and they formed a band. So basically, my dad has been playing his whole life, a very, very, very good player, very, very clean player, and I think because of that, just turned out to be a really good teacher.
Instrument was such a thing as an instrument handed down through generations, or did folk just play their own acquired instruments? What happened?
Yep, I've got my grandfather's pipes. I said it is Silver and Ivory Henderson's, and so they weren't the pipes that he left Scotland with, because he actually saved money in order to get pipes like that, and his brother actually went and tried out a number of pipes at Peter Henderson's shop, and then picked the pipes, paid for them, and then when one of my great uncles brought them over to the States back in thereafter World War II.
So that would be pipes that were made during the decade of the First World War?
Well, I think post World War One, pre World War II kind of a thing. So
you don't know what decade they were made in.
Well, with the silver marks, the people think it's easy in order to read the hallmarks and stuff like that. I don't find it easy.
No.
Funnily enough, but 37 is what I've been told what the stamp mark is. So
so that's quite late on too.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of money in these days and that kind of a thing. Even though when you think about it now, it wasn't a lot of money, but I think it was purchased a couple of years before they went over and before they did. I think the most important thing was to get a good pipe. And then once they got a good pipe, then to save money as far as the journey going over to stateside.
But they are Henderson bagpipes.
They are Henderson bagpipes, absolutely.
Are you still playing these?
I am, yes. Yeah.
Do you have any other instruments?
I do. I've got another set of Hendersons that there's quite an interesting story about that, which
might as well tell us it.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
I was living up in Ontario at this time, and we're talking, we're talking probably mid-80s, and my dad wanted to get back playing again. So I was playing his dad's pipes, and so he said to me, he says, be on the lookout for a set of pipes. So anyway, I'm sitting like going, you know, I mean, pipes, even silver and ivory pipes in these days were $2,500 minimum, you know.
Yeah.
So I met was looking around for pipes and going and pricing them and doing this and doing that, and you're sitting like going, goodness sakes. So a very good friend of my grandfather on my mum's side. My grandfather on my mum's side was a lovely guy. He was a
What's
guy.
his name?
His name was Donald McLean.
Okay, Donald McLean. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a piper, but
No.
he was a foreman at Ford's, and he was the kind of guy that just was a big brother, a big uncle to everybody.
Okay.
Everybody loved him. So hang on just a minute. His name, I call him Norman Sarney. I'm trying to think of his surname. When you're a Highlandman, you're Norman whatever, and where he lived at was Sarnia.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was Norman Sarnia, and then there was this guy called Bill Ferguson.
Okay.
So Bill Ferguson was a piper who was a Canadian piper who's had lineage to Northern Ireland. His father was a good friend of my grandfather's, and he actually came to Detroit on his honeymoon. And so my grandfather caught wind of this and said, you're not staying at a hotel, you're staying at our house, and vacated the room and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, long story short,
Yeah.
this guy really loved my grandfather. So I was playing at the games in Sarnia in Ontario, and this thin man was over by a tree. He came over and he said to me, he says, are you Mary Catherine's son? Now, when you go to Highland Games, you're generally saying MacPhee's boy.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was really surprised at the fact that I was now Mary Catherine's son. I've always been Mary Catherine's son. Was my best friend, and so lost her in 2009. However, in this environment, it's not something that really happens. And I says, yeah. Oh well, let me tell you. Well, and he started talking to me, and he lovely. And so he says, listen, what are you doing tonight? And I says, well, I was just going to drive back to St. Thomas, Ontario. He says, no. He says, you're coming and you're staying at the house. So anyway, went to his house. Long story short, he had me playing pipes and loved the pipes and this and that. And so I just happened to say to him, I says, yeah, I says, these are my grandfather's pipes. I says, my dad is wanting these back because he wants to start playing again. So I'm looking for pipes. And so he says, oh, right. So he left the room and he came through with the set of silver and ivory Anderson bagpipes that hadn't been played in a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, do you mind hemping those up and putting them in your bag? I says, no, not at all. So had to tighten up the cords a wee bit, and just a wee bit of hemping and this and that. And so anyway, I was playing along, and as good a pipe, if not better, than my grandfather's. So he just wanted me to keep playing those pipes all night long, you know. So kept playing, and so anyway, we went to bed. Went to bed late. Got up the next morning, and he's making breakfast and stuff like that. And I said to him, I says, listen, it's been great, all that kind of stuff. I need to keep going. I've got to work tonight. I was working a night shift on that particular night at a tomato processing plant. But anyway, he says, I heard those pipes being played last night, and he says, you know, these pipes need to be played. And I says, okay. He said, so you take them with you, you play them, keep me informed on how they're doing to you, and if you get any prizes, let me know, or whatever, stuff like that. Just keep me up to date on your progress. And I says, I says, great, aye, yeah, sure. So anytime I did a recital or I got prizes or anything else like that, I picked up the phone and I called Bill and I says, listen, Bill, I said, I got a third, or I got this, and one of the judge's comments on the sheet is great pipe and this and that, and he goes, oh, that's great, Donald. So the next year had come about, went back to Sarnia games, was playing along, stuff like this, and after I played, he had tears in his eyes. So he says it's lovely having the pipe being played. He says I'm really delighted at this. I says, oh, that's great. And I said to him, I said, listen, I says, would you ever think about selling them? He says, oh, well, he says, maybe one day. He says, maybe one day. He says, but you just keep playing them and you take care of them. So the following year, I didn't know this at the time, but I believe he was diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
I didn't know this at this time, and so he said to me, he says, listen, this is the following year, he says, listen, I've decided to sell the pipes. And I says, oh, right. And now, a smart guy would have, put a tenner a week away or stuff like this. In these days, you don't think about stuff like that, and so you're sitting there going, where am I going to come up with $2.5 grand?
What age were you then, roughly?
I was probably 19.
Oh, so it's quite young, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Aye.
Yeah, so I says, oh, okay. He says, so I says, well, you know what they're worth, Bill, and I know what they're worth, and I may not have, well, I definitely don't have full amount. However, if I could, do a payment plan kind of a thing or whatever, he says, well, he says, let's just worry about that later. So he had 2 documents that he opened it up, and it read as though I, Bill Ferguson, wanted to sell these pipes for an undisclosed amount to Donald MacPhee and this and that, and I signed it, and I signed the other one and stuff like that, and I says okay, and he said to me, he says, now, he says, this is something that's very serious to me, and I says, okay. I says, yeah, sure, what? He says, I'm going to sell you these pipes, but you cannot sell them for any more than what you purchased them for.
Well,
and I said, okay. He says, now this is very, very important to me. And I says, I promise you, I give you my word that I will not sell them for any more than what I purchased them for. So he said, well, you're going to buy them for $1. And so I said to him, well, and he Sarnia is on the border of Michigan and Ontario, so
right.
I said to him, I says, is this an American dollar, or is this a Canadian dollar, and he says, whichever you want to pay me. So those were the pipes I won the gold medal with, and due to travel restrictions, I don't. I play those pipes. I've got them and stuff like this, of course. But the majority of the time that just I play pipes, it's on a McCallum set of pipes that I just play and keep playing, and I use those to travel. And
so you take the McCallums to North America.
Yeah,
and they leave the other ones here in Scotland because of travel restrictions on
exactly.
Ivory and Blackwood.
Exactly, my dad said to me, he says, well, he says, are you playing the pipes? Are you using them to pipe for dancing? And you're sitting there like going, Dad, in this country, when you pipe for dancing, moisture issues and stuff like that. So I use them to pipe at small competitions and stuff like that, just to keep playing them. And bagpipes are meant to be played. Yeah. And so yeah. So that's that. And
that's very interesting. Yes, that's a good story. That.
Yeah. What's great about this is that if anything happens to me, I've sworn Christine. I says, listen, honey. I says, anything happens to me, I said, those stay in the family, and I says, this $1 US. So she says, oh, I right. So she kind of early in our marriage, of course, got got me riled up by going, well, when you're dead and gone, you know, I'll be selling those for what they're worth. But
that's interesting. So now you're still over there.
I
You're
am
still over in USA.
Yep.
We'll keep you there for a second.
Okay.
You've been competing over North America.
Yep.
Prominent prizes.
Yeah. Well, we didn't stay in the Detroit area. My dad got the job of teaching bagpipes in Dunedin, Florida, in 1974, in fall of 1974.
Okay.
So we actually moved. He went down a year early, and we went down as a family in fall of '75, and so that's when I was 9, and I had a practice trainer in my hand for as long as I could remember, and my first competition was when I was 10, and the practice trainer at the Stone Mountain Highland Games, and Sandy Jones was the adjudicator.
Where is that now?
That's in Georgia.
Georgia.
Yep. So they have a circuit in Florida, about an 8-game circuit that went around and competed at and extended up to Savannah, Georgia, and Atlanta, Georgia. Stone Mountain Highland Games were the biggest at that time as far as that goes. They've got the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, which I competed at a couple of times. Stone Mountain is right in Atlanta, whereas the Grandfather Mountain, it's more difficult to get to. So
that's the start of the Appalachians.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So so competed in my preteens and my teens and all that kind of stuff in Florida. Reached the age of 12, and I was basically a big fish in a small pond. And my dad has always been my teacher, and so in order to get me competing against better players and stuff like that, he sent me up to his friend's house up in Ontario, Gordon Tuck, who was pipe major of the McNish Distillery Pipe Band.
I've heard of that.
Yep, and so.
Just interject a second. Did you say you're competing?
Yep.
P-work as well, or
Well,
light music?
Not at this time. Predominantly light music. Predominantly light. Yeah,
right,
light
carry
music.
on. So
Yep.
this.
Yeah, my dad knows about, I don't know, 6 to 8 P-works, and would the majority of the work, well, 99% of the work he did with me was all light music. He taught me a Crinluath and taught me a Crinluath Amach, but as far as tunes go, he got another gentleman who was a P-work man, who was a student of Donald McMillan, the guy that wrote John MacDonald's Welcome to South Uist.
Yes.
Great
match. Yeah.
Well, he was from South Uist, and he immigrated over to North America, settled in the Detroit area, and anyway, he was teaching P-work, and this guy Bill Palmer was my first P-work teacher, and so he took me back.
Was it any good, Palmer?
Oh yeah.
His knowledge.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, absolutely. And
how did they teach you? Is it by playing to your, singing to your?
Sing to me, and then I had the Kilbury book.
Yeah.
And he basically taught me the way that a cadence is written versus how it's played and that kind of a thing. And so he took me through about 6 tunes, you know, Glengarry's Lament, Donald the Lagan, and I won the marches at the Argyllshire Gathering in '94, and the Strathspey and Reels in 2001, I believe. But from '94 on, I was a former winner at both the Northern Meeting and the Argyllshire Gathering.
Great stuff.
So I was able to play in the big MSR in both, so I was well established as a competitor before I moved over here.
Okay.
Ontario has a circuit that basically there's games almost every weekend. So there's a 12-week stretch where there's 9 games scattered about Ontario. So wherever the band went, I went, and I competed solos, and I remember Mike Gray. You mentioned him before. he was a little bit older than me, and I remember him playing as a youngster, and Scott McCauley and these kinds of guys who were older than myself, but over in North America you have graded. In the amateur ranks are graded.
Yeah.
There's practice trainer, and then grade 4, and then grade 3, and grade 2, and grade 1. So I think I was competing in grade 2 at that time, the competition was much stiffer than it was in Florida, so made me work even more. Gord taught me while I stayed at his house, and I would play to him maybe twice a week. Because I was hanging around the band and stuff like that, I got the band music, and so the solos were held in the morning and the band contest in the afternoon. So when I was done in the morning, I just hung around the band, and I either got water for guys, or beers for guys, or towels for guys, or I was kind of like the guy that just went and the Johnny go get somebody, the Johnny go get something. So anyway, every summer I did that, and became good enough to be able to play in the band. I learned the band music, so the day before my 14th birthday, I had my first band practice, and I was playing in a grade 1 band called the McNish Distillery.
Excellent.
So
That's excellent.
Yeah.
A wee quick question.
Yeah.
Pipe bags.
Yep.
At that time, sheepskin.
Elk hide.
Elk.
Elk hide. It was a very blackish brownish bag, and
I've seen them. It's a hide bag.
Oh yeah. The bag manufacturer that were big at that time were L&M, and they were an Ontario bag maker, and so yeah.
How did that react moisture wise?
Well, we never had. I sound like an old guy when I say this, but we never had the moisture that we have nowadays. I mean, funnily enough, moisture would accumulate on the reeds or accumulate on the pipes, but you just you don't have the moisture in the States that you have in this country. I mean, it
wasn't as humid.
No, this was during the summer months, and you had the heat. So the way it's been explained to me is that you've got 98.6 or 31 degrees Celsius blowing into the bag, and if the surrounding temperatures within those degrees of 10 degrees, well, there's not an accumulation of moisture. Mm-hmm. At least I never experienced any, and I was doing a lot of playing.
Were you playing cane?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's nothing but cane in those days.
Aye, but people watch now think that it's always been plastic back for the last 1,000 years,
Oh yeah. And never had a water trap, never just an elk hide bag, and when you felt it, and when it was non-oily, you seasoned it, and I used my.
So it didn't take a lot of seasoning.
No.
What did you use for seasoning?
Well, my grandfather had a mixture that 2 ounces of brown sugar, 2 ounces of honey, 2 ounces of glycerin, 2 ounces of alcohol, and each of those properties had something to do with it. You heated it up, and what the alcohol did was it forced the sugar and the glycerin, which created kind of like a gooiness of it, and to evaporate. And when it evaporated through the pores, it took this stuff into the pores, so it became an airtight bag. So and I mean, bags would last us at least 2-3 years without a doubt.
Yeah,
and then
that's interesting. That's an interesting question. Really.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're in the verges of the pipe band. You're 14.
Yeah.
You're competing with McNish. Is it Clan McNish?
No, McNish Distillery. They had a whiskey. They had a whiskey that was a Scotch whiskey called McNish.
Yeah.
And they were owned by the Hiram Walker Group, who had a Canadian whiskey called Wiser's, which is very, very popular. And so the band got a sponsorship as far as it goes, and so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're competing through your teenage years and you're doing quite well, you're around the games and all the rest of it.
Yep.
I think we'll leave North America.
There we go.
When did we leave?
Well, to just backtrack slightly, when I broke into the professional grade, I was 16, and my marches, Trespades and reels were the Highland Wedding, Abercrombie Highlanders, big tunes and stuff like that. My Peebrooks were Glengarry's Lament, Donald Malagan when everyone else was playing McSwan Roig and Donald Dougal Mackay and these kinds of things. So there was a gap there. Mike Cusick used to come down and take lessons, light music lessons off of my dad when he was at Vanderbilt University. So Mike Cusick is my sister's husband. He's a social climber. He's married into the MacPhee family.
Okay.
That's
so it's your sister's husband.
That's right. Yeah.
I've also interviewed Mike, as you know.
Absolutely.
And it was a fantastic interview, actually. Pretty understated, and I don't know if to the viewer here, please get right on to Mike Cusick's interview, because it's very, very good indeed. It's an excellent, a great speaker, and
that's it.
And he spoke about his various travails about learning bagpipe and obtaining teachers. So
that's right.
He went to
he during spring break and during the October break and stuff like this. He would come down to Florida where we lived, and it was much warmer than where he was at. So he lived with us and for a week, and my dad would teach him pipes and he enjoyed the warm weather and that kind of a thing. I think maybe that's how the romance started with my sister and him, and
sister's name?
Donna.
Donna
MacPhee, Donna Cusick, and my dad wouldn't take money. Mike, listen, I owe you this and that, at least for food or this or that. He says no. So as reimbursement, Mike's dad sent me to the Balmoral schools that were in the States, where Jimmy McIntosh and Murray Henderson taught at.
Yeah.
So he sent me to go to these schools, and that was as far as payback goes for taking care of his son and for teaching his son and that kind of a thing. So that was my first introduction into really serious kind of Peeber. Was at the Balmoral schools. And
what states at the Balmoral schools?
Well, see, they hold them all over the place. So there's the Old Dominion University I went to a number of times. It's basically, they hold them at learning institutions where they have places to live, like dormitories and a cafeterias, and then a learning environment like a classroom. And when school wasn't going on at that time at these universities, then people could rent these
premises.
These premises, and so it was very conducive to it. And I believe most of the schools that are even going along nowadays in North America, they're held at these learning institutions that don't have their local traffic that go on during their terms and stuff like that. So that's where my more serious Peeber came from, and that's where my
was it Jimmy McIntosh
it was Jimmy McIntosh, and it was Murray Henderson. Murray did the light music, Jimmy did the Peeber. At that time, Alec Duthert did the drumming.
Yeah.
And I've got to mention that my first school, I went there, and you had a students' recital, stuff like this. So I played, and Alec Duthert came to me that night, and he says, "Listen, son, I'm needing you to come into my classroom." He says, when are your classes? And I told him. He says, "Good." He says, "Well, right before lunch, come in." He says, "I'm going to have you play the march I'm teaching these drummers." So I was like going, okay. So I said, "Yeah, great, whatever, So took my practice trainer down to his room, stuff like that. And it was the Clan McRae Society, I remember it. And he passed me the pipe music, and he says, "You have a look at that." He says, "I'm going to have you play that with the boys here." So you just have to look through that. Have you played this tune before? And I was like, no. And
It's a big tune.
well, oh yeah. So, but like at that time,
Aye.
I could read what a low A was and a C
Aye.
and an E and a high A, and I could read all the notes of the scale. But as far as reading rhythms, I needed somebody to play it for me,
Yeah.
and then I could catch on to it. So I was sitting there and I was like going, oh, God, I wish he'd hum how this would go and stuff like this. So anyway, the time came for, right, you ready to go? And I said to him, I says, could you hum me how this goes? And he goes, oh, right. And he was lovely. He was absolutely awesome. He didn't embarrass me or anything. He was, oh, right. Right, okay, son, that's okay. So I went, right, well, maybe tomorrow we'll do this or another day we'll do this. And so the boys went to lunch, and he says, listen, son, he says, are you hungry? And I says, well, it's lunchtime. And he says, well, he says, do you know how to read the rhythms? And I said, no. I says, I can read what notes are. You know, I could read what the notes are. But as far as if you actually hum how it goes, I can pick it up real quick.
Yeah, but most people really need the audio bit, you know,
Well,
just a quick fix.
He says, I'll tell you what, you go eat your lunch and you meet me back here an hour before next lesson. And he taught me how to read rhythms, and he broke it down. And so that afternoon and that night and then that morning and through that, I was able to play Clan McRae Society to the drummers, and it for that week-long time period, any questions I had, and I was a guy that asked a bunch of questions, and so any question I had regarding music, simple time, compound time, all that kind of stuff, I was to go and ask him, and he sat me down and he talked me all through it, and it was actually it was great because my dad never taught me how to read rhythms.
Aye.
He would go like what all pipers do.
Yeah.
He would hand me the music. He would play me the music.
Yeah.
So you pick it up, do this like that, and where you're not sight reading, you're sight hearing. You know.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing, and that was one of the great many bits of the Balmoral schools. They called them the Balmoral schools because it was the learning of the Bobs of Balmoral.
Yes.
That was being
Mike
taught.
Tosh is very keen in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I interviewed him as well, and his interview was good. I went up to Tayport when he was across for his 90th birthday.
Right.
And interviewed him, and it's good. It's excellent.
Yeah. So, as far as coming over here, I immigrated to this country in 1997 when I got married. 1994, I believe. I met my wife in Houston, Texas. Yeah, and so it was love at first sight for me, Alan. It took her a couple of years to come
Mike
up.
Cusack is from there, is it not?
Yes,
Houston,
yeah. Well,
Texas.
that's where my two sisters live now, and their husbands and their families all were there, and that's because of St. Thomas Episcopal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was your wife? Where was she?
From Scotland, but what the Highland dancing steps change every year.
Okay.
So what the Highland dancing examining bodies do is they send out dancers to go and teach those steps to North America, different places in North America. So it's called a Set Steps Tour. So it was Christine that was sent out to do the Set Steps Tour, and my two sisters have been teaching in Houston for a number of years at this time. So I have a big school. And so
your
there was always
were also into the Highland dancing, and Christine came across to show them the latest steps.
That's it. Yeah, my
and that was 94.
When Christine came
Yeah.
over, my two sisters, Diane wanted to learn the pipes, but my dad wouldn't teach her, and so they danced. So and then they taught dancing. And the reason why I guess I'm very, very comfortable with piping for dancing, sorry to go back and forth, is that both of my sisters taught dancing in Dunedin, Florida. So when I got to the pipes, when I got to the pipes and I was able to play the pipes, my dad wanted me playing the pipes as much as possible. He was not a fan of the practice trainer.
Right.
So during classes, he would encourage me to pipe for dancing in my two sisters' dance classes that they were teaching dancing at this time.
So what age would you be?
I would be 12. I would be 13.
Jeez,
Oh yeah.
All right. So you're brought up in this mode of playing for Highland dancers.
Exactly.
That must have been fantastic for you personally to obtain the timing of Strathspey's and the expression of Strathspey's, which probably is the most difficult type of tune for solo pipers, if you like, because they don't know how fast or how slow or how the upbeat or the downbeat or whatever. But you're just getting all this naturally because you're seeing dancing.
Exactly. And the difficult part about Strathspey's is getting that Scotch snap. And when you're forced to produce that at a young age, you really never think about it other than the fact of no son, it's got to be never explained it to me as far as how we incorporate music is by extending these notes and shortening other notes.
Yeah.
It just says, now watch when a Highland dancer dances that that once they hit the floor they bounce back up again. So you have to create that lift in order when you're piping.
You don't want them on the floor at all.
You don't want them on the floor.
Because if they're on the floor, that's your short notes.
Yeah. So I was piping for dancing at a very, very early age, and wow, my dad loved it because of the fact that I was playing pipes.
Right.
So I wasn't out throwing rocks at windows and getting into trouble and all that kind of thing.
You must have built up quite a compendium of tunes, for Highland dancers.
I did.
All the different tunes, and that's almost an unknown art now amongst pipers. There's very few pipers can do that.
Yeah.
And if they can do it, they've got a very limited amount of tunes that they can do it with.
Yeah, so piping for dancing, my dad loved it, so anyway, my wife came over for a Set Steps tour, love at first sight for me, like I said, took her a couple of years to come around to my line of thinking, and then she adjudicated a competition in Sarasota, Florida, and I was the piper for dancing, and so tried to induce conversation, and was only getting one word responses, and so that certainly told me that
what age?
At this time, let's see, late 20s probably, mid 20s, stuff, that kind of a thing. So which told me that there's more interest on my end than it is on her end, and so learn now that the fact of that was her being nervous or her being shy, So anyway, she adjudicated the U.S. championships in 1996 in July the 20th, and she wasn't seeing anybody over here or anything like that. I was actually, it was the Sarasota before that one, when one of the dancers that she danced with, a dancing adjudicator dancer called Katie Rowan, I picked up the dancing adjudicators because I was a piper for dancing and drove down to the contest, and so via driving down to the contest, the other adjudicator flew into Sarasota, just talking along and going, so, and so, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend, or what's going on there? And I said, oh, well, no, and it's not for trying, and all this kind of stuff. And so, geez, you're around a lot of dancers, and is there any dancers that that you're really interested in. And I says, oh yeah. I says Christine Lacey. I says, I think she's lovely. I says, oh, just absolutely lovely. And so she says, you're joking me. And I said, no. And I'm driving the car. She says, no. I says, why? She says, Christine was a bridesmaid at my wedding. And I says, oh. I says, oh wow. So I just come out with my first dancing CD at this time, and I gave them both of the adjudicators one. She says, post this off there to Christine. That'll start the introduction, and I'll go back. I'll have a word with her, and you ask her out. She'll say yes, and go out and have a dinner and see if everything goes okay. And I says, listen, this sounds like, she says, are you wanting to get to know Christine better? And I says, yeah. She says, well, this is how you do it. So anyway, I got back. It's quite funny. I got back from Sarasota to Houston, where I was living at just at the time, and so I had Christine's address. Bert Barr, who was the drumming instructor, was at the table. So he says, oh, is this you posting off one of your CDs? Have you sold one? You know? And I says, well, I says, no. I says, it's really this dancing adjudicator that I really fancy. And so I'm going to send it off to her, and hopefully she'll use it in the dance class. And so this and that kind of a thing. And when I go over, I'd like to ask her out. And so he says, all right, where does she live at? And so it was Ballach. Now, at this time, the postcodes weren't as prevalent as what they are now. So it was 16 Red Fox Ballach. And he goes, well, you better have more than that on it. And I said, why? And he says, well, there's 4 Ballachs in Scotland. I says, oh, come on, you're joking. He says, no. He says, there's one near Condort. Yeah. There's one up near Inverness. There's one in Loch Lomond, and then there's another one that's down toward the Borders area, I believe. I'm not sure. I've been to the other 3. I've been in the one near Condort. I've been in the one nearest Inverness, and of course this one. So I was like going, oh Jesus. So I says, well, I guess I'll just post 4 of them, you know, and just do it that way. So I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? So she was that was in the spring. So I was like, geez, what do I do? So she was one of the adjudicators of the U.S. Championship, which was actually being held in Houston, Texas at that time, and I was fighting for dancing at it. So I figured, right, well, I'll keep it. I'll personally hand it to her in July, and hopefully start it off that way. So anyway, here comes July. I'm flying in from a piping school I was teaching at, and I saw her, and I says, listen, I says, I was talking to Katie, and she said yes, and I says, listen, here's a CD. I said, please feel free. I said, use it in the dance class, stuff like this. So what do I owe you for it? I said, no, please. You let me know if there's anything I need to change or stuff like this or whatever. If you have any comments on it, let me know. And she says, all right. So she was adjudicating, and I was fighting for dancing, and it became more than one word responses whenever we were kind of blethering. So it was July the 20th, that night, where the U.S. Championships were done, and we all ate as a group, all the adjudicators and all the pipers and all that kind of stuff. And she actually headed down one side of this long table, and I headed down the other side. And there was a dancing adjudicator who was ahead of me, who was going to be sitting across from Christine. His name was Bill Truck. And so I says, oh geez, no, I've got to sit across from Christine. So I actually grabbed his belt loop, and I pulled him back, and I went ahead, and so was able to communicate with Christine that night, and it was great. And our first date in Scotland was the Wednesday before the World Pipe Band Championships, because that's when I was coming over. That's when I came over as a solo competitor, that kind of a thing, generally around that time. And so had our date here at Duck Bay Marina, and December the 3rd that year I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. So
Well done.
yeah.
What
So
year was that?
that was 1996 when that happened. We got married in 97. So
Very good.
Yeah, I got married in September of 97, and what from that December till then was just the process of getting my paperwork in order so that I could get my fiance's visa and reed making at that time and doing all that stuff and bringing that over to Scotland.